The day they buried Mary. It was in eastern Washington, late January, 1880. The morning was still and bitterly cold, the kind of cold that pressed into the bones and made the air feel heavy. The storm had passed in the night, leaving behind a thick, unbroken blanket of snow that stretched out across the prairie. It was undisturbed except for the tracks leading to the Anderson homestead, to the small rise behind the house. It was there, on that quiet hill, overlooking the barren fields, that they would bury their daughter. No neighbors came. No minister stood with them to offer prayers. This was not the kind of funeral with hymns or scripture, or black-clad mourners speaking soft words of comfort. Out here in this vast and unforgiving land, grief was a private thing. It was just the family, just them. Eric had built the coffin himself. It was small, too small. The wood was rough, made from leftover planks meant for repairing the barn. It had been the only thing that he could do in the wake of the loss, the only task that kept his hands from shaking, that kept his mind from breaking. Now, as he stood beside the grave, his broad hands gripped the simple box so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His breath came in ragged clouds against the frigid air, but he did not shiver. He had not felt warm since the moment he had placed Mary in Ingrid's arms and realized she would never wake. The ground had been frozen solid, and digging the grave had taken hours. Eric had begun before dawn, his movements mechanical, his body numb to the cold. Every strike of the shovel against the hard-packed earth had sent a shock up his arms, but he did not stop. He couldn't stop. When he had first struck the earth, he had expected something to stop him. Some voice in the wind, some sign that this could not be happening, that a father should not be digging a grave for his own child. But there was nothing. Just the wind, just the snow, just the vast, indifferent sky. Ingrid had not spoken since the night before. She stood now beside the grave, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, though she did not seem to notice the cold. Her face was pale and hollow, her dark hair unkempt, falling loose over her shoulders. Her arms hung at her sides, empty. She had held Mary all through the night, refusing to let her go until the morning light made it impossible to deny that it was time. When Eric had finally, gently taken the baby from her arms, she had not fought him. She had simply turned her face away, her expression unreadable. Now, as Eric knelt over to lower the coffin into the ground, she remained still. Elise, standing by her mother, bit her lip so hard that it nearly bled. At 9 years old, she understood enough to know that something terrible had happened, but not enough to understand why. Her little hands were balled into fists, her small frame tense against the cold. Henrik clung to her side, his face half hidden in her skirt. He was only 7, but he understood even less. Johann, just 2 years old, did not understand at all. He stood near Eric, playing absently with the frayed hem of his coat, his small breath curling into the air. He looked up at his father with wide, curious eyes. confused as to why his mother was not holding the baby, why everyone was so quiet, and why no one was smiling. Eric swallowed the lump in his throat. This was wrong. A father should not have to bury his daughter. A mother should not have to stand in the cold, staring into the grave meant for the child she had carried, nursed, and loved. But there was no choice. The coffin rested in the shallow grave, stark against the darkness of the earth. Eric had no words. He had thought, perhaps, that he would say something, offer some kind of farewell, but standing there, staring down at the little box that held his daughter, he found himself unable to speak. Then slowly, methodically, he began to shovel the dirt back into the grave. The first thud of earth against the wood made Elise flinch. Henrik buried his face in Elise's skirt. Ingrid did not move. Eric kept going, and he did not stop until the last bit of earth was packed down, until there was no sign that a hole had ever been there, only a small mound of dirt, raw and uneven against the smooth snow. When it was done, he set a single stone at the head of the grave. He had no wood to carve a marker, no words to inscribe, just the stone, just something to say that she was here. For a long time, no one moved. Then, at last, Ingrid stepped forward. She knelt in the snow, her blanket falling from her shoulders, her breath shallow. She reached out with trembling fingers and smoothed the dirt with her palm, as if tucking Mary in one last time. Then finally, she spoke. "Little friend, sleep safely now." It was the same lullaby that she had sung to Mary in the night, the same lullaby she had sung to all of her children. But this time, her voice was barely more than a breath. She didn't cry. Eric wished she would. He wished she would scream, wail, hit him, do something to show that she was still here, that she had not buried herself along with their daughter. But she only smoothed the dirt once more and then rose to her feet. Without another word, she turned and walked back towards the house. Eric stood there for a long time, watching her go. The wind stirred around him, lifting the snow into the air, covering the fresh grave bit by bit. Soon, there would be no sign of what lay beneath. No sign that the land had taken something from them once again. He clenched his fists. Ingrid had said goodbye, but Eric knew, deep in his bones, that she had left something of herself in that grave too, and he did not know if she would ever come back.